from the poor to the rich and the tiny trickle back down. So Peter, thank you so much for coming.
Woo! Let's start again. Thanks very much. Thanks for inviting me. It's really important to be taking part in things like this, because as a trade union, the Rail Maritime Transport Union is a very progressive and militant union, and not just against the firms that we have dealings with, but against companies like them up there who are part of the fight against workers throughout the world. We are an international union with international links and in very close working together with other workers throughout the world. I'm going to take you back, as I said earlier, to 1945, when people returned from a war and said never again were they going to have that sort of right-wing oppressive government ruining their lives. And they voted in a government that, on face value, with Clement Attlee, was hardly a Che Guevara type figure. But what they did was revolutionary. They built social housing, nationalised the coal mines, nationalised my industry, the railways, brought, most importantly, the NHS in, and give people a bit of a future to look forward to. Move on 70 years and we've gone back over 70 years in one sense. We haven't got any of that anymore. I don't blame the Conservatives, and neither would anyone in my trade union blame the Conservatives for supporting people like these, because that's what they do. They are their people. And Derek Hatton famously said, not a great hero of mine, but famously said in the 1980s, if we looked after people as well as the right wing look after their people, we wouldn't be in the shit we're in now on the left. And that's the problem. While people are suffering around the world, out there literally now suffering, the left and progressive elements in the UK spend all their time arguing and debating in little rooms in pubs about what Marx said or Trotsky might have said, instead of thinking what they have in common. The Uruguayan revolutionaries in the 60s, a long time ago, said, with action we are united, with words we are divided. And that's what we should be looking at. We're in a state now where young people have no hope for the future. The TUC's doing nothing to help them. Very few trade unions are doing anything. They brought in anti-trade union laws and people just sat back and accepted it. And the trade unions have a proud history of being at the forefront of any rebellion against this sort of action. And these people have been part of the problem. These people have continually bombarded the people, the workers of this country. Most working class people I know read The Sun, and The Sun is poisonous against us, and always has been. And the Daily Mail has been an absolute outrage towards my trade union. Now, I can't lay the blame of Bob Crow's death at their door, but they certainly hounded him. And the day I got the phone call from Bob's wife telling me that he died, she was ringing me not only to tell me he died, but to tell me that the Daily Mail reporters were trying to take photographs of his body as it was laid in the hospital dead. That is the sort of people these people are. And we need some sort of solution for the young people, for the future. What you're doing, what Occupy does, what 38 Degrees do, what Anonymous do, fills me with pride. And I wish the traditional left of trade unions, my trade union, because I can hold my hand up as wheel as bad, are doing nothing. Young people today want to see direct action. They want to see the fight to give them some hope for the future, which they haven't got, and nobody is showing them. They want things done instantly, and trade unions, in many respects, are seen as dinosaurs, and quite rightly, I'd have to agree with that. But that's not our fault, because we spend most of our time in court fighting these companies because of the anti-legislation that makes it really, really difficult for us to take strike action. I wish we could be more like the French, because the French wouldn't put up with this. You bring in these laws in France, they'd be out on the streets, burning it, smashing the place up, and I applaud them for that. And we should be the same, because these people will continually bombard people. And it's an obscenity that they're blaming the poor across Britain and across Europe and across the world for the problems, their problems caused by their stinking capitalist system. And the Labour Party say you can reform it. You can't. It is by its very nature anti-working, anti-poor. And these young kids today are getting degrees and no no criticism of them. With a degree, they're lucky if they get a job in some sort of service caff, etc., etc. And we should be hanging our heads in shame about it. Give them a bit of hope. And if the one thing I do today is get through to one of you who can go around and say to somebody else, I listen to him and I know he's right, and we should stand together, stop arguing, look what we have in common, fight with people across the world, and stop people like these destroying human life and nature across the world. Thank you for
Any questions for Peter, people, on poverty or trade unionism, etc.?
I just want to congratulate you, man. That's the best speech I've ever heard about. That's the most honest things I've ever heard from a trade union. It's about the state of the union today, so big up yourself, man. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I work in care, and I'm one of the well, there's not many people, less than 20% I think, in that company that are in unions. How do you get people to realise that being in a union is important and having a voice is important? How do you change their minds so they don't just think, oh, £10 a month I can't be asked?
I'm lucky. I came from a background in the 60s and early 70s when I started working in the shipyards. My family were trade unionists, and in them days you had to be in a trade union because it was a closed shop. You were either in a trade union or you weren't employed, as simple as that. And that was right across industries. And there was problems with that. It made people like shop stewards and branch secretaries gods, and you could be thrown out of the union, and by losing your job you would be losing your union membership, you would be out of work because you weren't a member of the union. Today it's very difficult. I don't blame, I despised Margaret Thatcher, I despise him, what he did at Wapping, I despise what they did with the trade unions, but a lot of the trade unions, if I'm brutally honest, or trade union members in the 70s didn't help themselves by going on strike because it was a sunny afternoon, and excuse my French, they wanted to go on the piss for the afternoon, look for an excuse. These were political, ideologically based strikes. They were typical working people wanting to go out and have a drink, which is fine, but it did damages, and it gave a problem to realistic, ideologically driven strikes like the miners' strike, like Grunwick, and also Wapping. It was very, very difficult. And the press were on their side, so a lot of young people grew up with that. Margaret Thatcher was different to the lot today in the sense that hers was all about the individual. The people who are in charge now, both in the Labour Party as well as the Tories, are the old establishment that we thought in 1945 that the Labour government got rid of. These are the real establishment. People at Thatcher probably couldn't stand either because she was self-made and that's what she believed in. And all these people, because of that, grew up believing trade unions were a mess, and the TUC, and I was a member of the General Council of the TUC, and I've stood at the TUC Congress and criticised them even though I was part of it. These people continually pay money and give money to trade unions to the Labour Party that then brings in worse laws, anti-trade union laws, and kicking them back in the teeth after it. It's a nonsense. So the TUC has got to take some responsibility. We've been successful because we had a charismatic leader who wasn't scared to speak out in Bob Crow, and it was easy to recruit people in because they saw him. In the 70s, most people my age could name every single trade union leader of prominence. Over the last 5 years, people could probably name Bob Crow, maybe Glenn McCuskey a push. So young people have sort of been disengaged over the years from trade unions. To get people back in is very difficult. You've got to prove to them that your trade union will do something. My union's very, very democratic. I'm the president of the RMT. When my 3 years up, I go back to my job as a signaller. The executive will make the decisions, are also rank and file, and at the end of 3 years they go back to work. And all our decisions are made by the rank and file and passed upwards. Not all trade unions work that way. A lot of them appoint their office. Everyone in ours is democratically elected. So what I'd say to you is bring people in, try to get them involved, and make them understand the most important thing that my kids understand, even though most of my kids who are growing up now despise trade unions for the reasons I've said, oh, you're dinosaurs, you're a waste of time. I'd rather be out on the streets like Occupy, VEDs, European God doing something, demonstrating whatever, occupying buildings, brilliant, I'm all for that. But to bring people in and make them understand, you can tell them about legal attitudes and everything else, but it's about job protection. It's about making them understand that the trade union isn't Peter Pinkney, isn't Bob Crow, isn't Len McCluskey, it isn't Francis O'Grady, it's every single one of them, and they should be made to feel important. Go to the branch meetings and make damn sure that these unions who portray the working class listen to the people who put them there and do what they want.
Could you explain a little bit about the historical struggle of the trade unions and the birth of them, and just give a little bit of a about kind of how long that struggle for workers' rights and stuff like that has been going on?
My union famously, pre-run of our trade union, the Associated Servants of Railway Workers, whatever it was, moved the resolution from the Trade Union Congress to form a party of Labour, and that same Labour Party expelled my trade union 11 years ago because we had the nerve to support a different political party in Scotland. It was our money, our wish, and it was a bit like High Noon. You either stop supporting other parties or you're expelled, or bring it on. And I never understand why the Labour Party distances itself from trade unions, because the trade unions themselves, and I'm going slightly off your question, but trade unions themselves formed the Labour Party. That's where it comes from. And you were, I don't know, I can't remember, you would have Ernest Bevan, not Nye Bevan, well, Nye Bevan, a coal miner, Ernest Bevan, a bus driver on London Transport. They became ministers, famous ministers. You would never get that now, because the thing's full of careerists. But going back, you could go back to the Toll Puddle martyrs that most people do, who formed an association and were sent to, deported to Australia, although it was later overturned. And obviously the Toll Puddle Martyr Festival celebrates that every year. And trade unions realised you had the Independent Labour Party with Ramsay MacDonald, but trade unions were initially not what they should have been, in my opinion. I'm not just speaking from I am a Marxist, I'm not speaking from a Marxist perspective, but we have different trade unions over here to say France, where there's syndicates, and it's, so you would have a trade union like CGT, which is like a little TUC, but it's run by a political party. CGT is the French Communist Party. We were slightly different, and a lot of the early trade unions were very sectionalist, and even in my time in the 70s, based around tradespeople. The RMT and the NUR before it, we have been progressive in the sense that we represent everybody. It doesn't, anybody can be the leader of our union, from a cleaner, no disrespect to them, to the top paid home rig workers that we have. People, other trade unions, I have to be careful, because our sister union, ASLEF, would only recruit train drivers, and the early trade unions were very like that. They were very sectionalised, but things changed. So the trade unions were born out of the birth of capitalism and of somebody to represent workers' rights. And I think over the years, the trade unions have done a really wonderful job, and it's only the last 30 or 40 years that it's started to really fall apart. And maybe we should look back to our roots and why they were formed in the first place, to battle people, not just them, all big businesses, to protect workers. And I think the original people's sub-trade unions wasn't just about that, about wages and decent working conditions. It was to change the system. It seemed then they would have had probably a bit more political nous than a lot of trade union members have now, and that includes leaders who were sat in Congress House with the TUC as well. And I've said that to them, and I'll say it, I don't care where I say it, because I wasn't elected for diplomacy, I've never been very diplomatic, I'll tell it how it is. And them places are full of people who have no interest in politics whatsoever. And to me, one of my predecessors as president, Tony Donaghy, a great friend of mine, always said to me, any trade union person who hasn't got politics isn't worth it, stay away from them. And I think that's true. The birth of the trade unions was born out of fighting against a different society, where you brought in a capitalist society, had politics behind them, and used the trade unions to progress that. Sadly, that is disappearing.
Any more questions? Any more questions, anybody? Can I borrow a question?
Spell up and got the green.
No, it's not. I'm just wondering what are your thoughts about why these 5 men, including Rupert Murdoch, have an agenda of actually creating more poverty in Britain, and why they don't. What is the agenda that actually 5 people could actually think that they will use their power to actually remove wealth from the bottom 80% of British society? Sorry.
Well, I've no doubt about what you're saying, well, it's true. I mean, I don't know how much money these people want. I don't know how many houses they want, how many cars they want, how many fancy holidays they want. I have no idea. I mean, obviously it's driven by greed. You have an awful situation at the moment where people like this are probably richer than some countries or some states, and there's no doubt about that. And they want to control the world. I mean, to me, a lot of governments nowadays are irrelevant, because in this country alone, they don't do anything without their say-so. Because the power they have, which is proved by they've got one of the most right-wing, atrocious Labour parties in existence, with a scumbag warmongering PM called Tony Blair. There's no doubt that they were behind getting him elected by appealing to the working people. They want, it's been called neoliberalism, whatever you want to call it. They want a situation where companies become more powerful. I used to teach for the RMT. I taught courses, and one of the courses was about global workplaces, and it was about who people work for. And most people would say something like, I don't know, Netweather's a bad choice, Boots or whatever, whoever they were working for. But in reality, there's probably about 10 companies in the world who own everything underneath it, Unilever being one of them. And these people are part of that, and they are ruling the world. I don't know, why do dictators, why does adult Hitler want to rule the world? Why do they do it? I don't know. And Napoleon, it's an ego power mad thing. I think I get like that sometimes. I want to rule the unions, but that's what they want to do. It's a progression of capitalism that probably Marx and people couldn't see. We would have thought we'd had a revolution by now. Unfortunately, people get sucked into the consumer society and the greed that came about in the 80s from Thatcher, Reagan and people like that. And I think it's just a progression of that, and they don't give a toss. You know, I might solve their consciences. I might be controversial here, but I've always been anti-charities, because people should realise when they're giving money, I don't mind animal charities because they can't help themselves, but when people are giving money to hospital charities, etc., you are letting these tax-dodging bastards off the hook, and that's what bothers me.
Thank you very much, Peter. We asked you to come and speak to us because we wanted to be inspired, and we wanted the words to go out. We actually think, thank you for sharing the words and getting across what Occupy believes is that actually the hijacking of our democracy by the billionaire class and the hijacking of our democracy by the billionaire owners of the media has actually had a huge impact on the poor of Britain, and not only just on the poor but on the middle classes. And as a result of their agenda and their hijacking of the democracy, people are so much poorer in this country, and it's a disgrace over the last 30 years that whilst the 1% gets 30 or 40% richer, the bottom 20% poor are 10 to 15% poorer, and that's not acceptable, and that's why we're here today. And thank you, Peter, for sharing your words with us.